What if I told you there was a woman who poisoned her husband, poisoned her daughter, faked threats against herself, disappeared while out on bail, created entirely new identities, and eventually pretended to be her own twin sister? You'd probably think I was describing a soap opera. But every bit of this story is true. I'm Esther, host of Once Upon a Crime, and this is the story of Marie Hilley, one of the most bizarre criminals in American history. And the strangest part is that for years, people believed her. Not because she was a criminal mastermind, not because she was particularly careful, but because she was incredibly good at becoming whatever people needed her to be. A victim, a widow, a grieving mother, a wealthy heiress, a sick woman, a devoted sister, and eventually, a fugitive. To understand how it all happened, we have to start in Alabama. Marie Hilley was born Audrey Marie Frazier in 1933 and grew up in a small Alabama town. Family members remembered her as charming, attractive, and accustomed to getting her way. As she got older, she became skilled at something that would define the rest of her life: creating stories. Sometimes she claimed she'd been neglected as a child. Sometimes she portrayed herself as misunderstood. Family members disputed many of these claims, but Marie had discovered something important very early in life. People are often willing to believe a compelling story, especially when it makes them feel sympathy. As a teenager, she met Frank Hilley. Frank was hardworking, dependable, and completely devoted to her. The couple married young and eventually settled in Anniston, Alabama, where they raised two children, Mike and Carol. To outsiders, they looked like a successful middle-class family. Frank worked hard. Marie held secretarial jobs. They bought a home, raised their children, and made friends. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. Marie loved spending money on expensive clothes, jewelry, furniture, and new cars. Lifestyle she wanted always seemed slightly beyond what the family could comfortably afford. Frank worked constantly to keep up. Marie opened store accounts and took out loans, hiding the debt from her husband. At the same time, the marriage was deteriorating. Friends noticed tension, arguments, and distance between Frank and Marie. He spent more time away from home, while Marie complained that nobody appreciated her. She told anyone who listened that she felt nobody loved her and that everybody was against her. Then, in 1974, Frank began getting sick. At first, it seemed minor. It began with headaches, stomach problems, and recurring fevers. But over time, the symptoms became more severe. He suffered nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, weakness, and confusion. Doctors couldn't explain it. Frank would improve for a while, then suddenly become ill again. The cycle repeated over and over. Then Frank discovered something devastating. He caught Marie having an affair. The revelation crushed him. According to their son Mike, Frank admitted he didn't know what to do. His marriage was falling apart, his health was failing, and nobody could explain why. In May of 1975, Frank's condition suddenly worsened. He was hospitalized. Doctors believed he might be suffering from hepatitis, but his health continued to decline. And on May 25, 1975, Frank Hilley died. He was only 45 years old. The official cause of death was listed as infectious hepatitis. His family and friends mourned, and everyone believed the official story that Frank Hilley died of natural causes. But that wasn't the end of the story. Within days, Marie collected life insurance money and quickly began spending it. She purchased a new car, new furniture, jewelry, and clothing. Friends were surprised at how quickly she went on a shopping spree. But that wasn't the strangest thing. Soon, strange incidents began to occur around Marie. There were fires, reports of gas leaks, anonymous threats, suspicious phone calls, break-ins, and odd notes left on her property. Again and again, police responded. Again and again, they found nothing. One officer, Lieutenant Gary Carroll, spent months investigating Marie's complaints. At first, he believed her. She seemed frightened. She seemed grateful for his help. She seemed like a lonely widow being harassed by someone. But eventually, he noticed something. No evidence surfaced for any of her claims. And even more oddly, the threats and strange occurrences disappeared whenever investigators got close. Phone calls stopped whenever police arranged traces. Then they started again when the traces were removed. It didn't make sense. Officer Carroll began to suspect that the person creating the drama might actually be Marie herself. As the police grew skeptical, Marie's financial situation was collapsing. Despite the insurance payout, she was running out of money. Loans piled up, credit cards ballooned, debt followed her everywhere. And then something happened that would ultimately expose everything. Her daughter Carol became sick. At first, it looked like a virus. Nausea, vomiting, stomach pain. But weeks passed, then months. Instead of improving, Carol got worse. She lost weight and developed severe headaches. Then something even more frightening began to happen. Her hands and feet began going numb. Soon, she had trouble walking. Doctors were baffled. Nothing they tried seemed to work. Tests revealed no answers. Some even began wondering whether the illness was psychological. Meanwhile, Marie remained constantly by Carol's side, helping with her medications and working closely with the doctors. At the time, nobody found that suspicious. She was Carol's mother, after all. She was trying to help. At least, that's what everyone believed. But some family members were beginning to notice a terrifying pattern. Frank had suffered mysterious stomach problems. Carol had mysterious stomach problems. Frank had reportedly received injections from Marie. Carol was now reportedly receiving injections from Marie. And now Carol was growing weaker every day. For the first time, family members began asking an impossible question. What if Carol wasn't suffering from a rare disease? What if someone was making her sick? And what if the person poisoning her was her own mother? As unbelievable as that sounded, the truth was about to be even worse. By the fall of 1979, Carol Hilley had been sick for months. Doctors were running out of ideas. The once healthy teenager had become weak and frail. She had lost a dangerous amount of weight. Her hands felt numb. Her legs barely worked. Walking had become difficult, and some days she couldn't stand without assistance. And with every passing week, Carol grew worse. At the same time, Marie's carefully constructed world was beginning to collapse. For years, she had managed to stay one step ahead of creditors. Not anymore. Checks were bouncing, and loans were overdue. Banks were hounding her. In September 1979, Marie was arrested on charges involving financial fraud. The arrest itself wasn't especially dramatic, but it started conversations. And those conversations changed everything. Frank's sister remembered something her brother had told her shortly before his death. Frank had told her that Marie was giving him injections. Now she was hearing that Marie had also been giving injections to Carol. The similarity was impossible to ignore. Marie's son Mike had his own disturbing memories about his mother's lies, financial schemes, and constant manipulation. And more disturbingly, he also remembered becoming violently ill after drinking a glass of Kool-Aid during an argument with his mother about money. Suddenly, things that had once seemed unrelated began forming a pattern. Mike contacted Carol's doctors with his suspicion. At first, they were skeptical. Poisoning sounded far less likely than some rare medical condition. Still, the information troubled them enough to take a closer look. And when they did, the entire case changed. Carol was eventually transferred to the University of Alabama Hospital in Birmingham, where she came under the care of neurologist Dr. Brian Thompson. Unlike the physicians who had been treating her for months, Dr. Thompson approached the case with fresh eyes. He reviewed every symptom: the nausea, the vomiting, the weakness, the numbness, the nerve damage, the dramatic weight loss. Then he heard about the injections. Immediately, a possibility occurred to him. Certain poisons could produce exactly these symptoms. One in particular stood out: arsenic. Arsenic poisoning is notoriously difficult to recognize. but victims often experienced the same collection of symptoms Carol was displaying. Dr. Thompson ordered testing. Before the results even returned, he noticed something significant. Thin white bands running across Carol's fingernails. This telltale sign is often associated with arsenic exposure. The lab results soon confirmed it. Carol Hilley wasn't suffering from a mysterious disease. She had been poisoned. The news stunned everyone involved. Hospital staff immediately restricted access to Carol. And investigators now had an even bigger question. If Carol had been poisoned, what about Frank? They reopened Frank Hilley's death investigation, reviewed his medical records, and compared his symptoms to Carol's. The similarities were striking. And both had received injections from Marie and became gravely ill under her care. Investigators obtained a court order to exhume Frank's body. 4 years after his death, the family finally learned the devastating truth. Frank Hilley had not died from hepatitis. He had died from arsenic poisoning. Experts found extraordinarily high levels of arsenic in his remains. Frank had been murdered. Soon afterward, investigators searched Marie's belongings. Among her possessions were containers linked to arsenic-based rat poison. The evidence piled up against her. Authorities charged Marie with attempting to murder Carol. Additional charges would follow. For the first time in her life, Marie Hilley seemed trapped. Her lies were unraveling, and investigators were closing in. But if there's one thing you've probably learned by now, it's this. Marie Hilley never accepted reality when she could create a new one. After posting bail, she checked into a motel. Then suddenly, she vanished. When investigators arrived, they found a bizarre note suggesting that she had been kidnapped. Investigators weren't fooled. They had spent years untangling Marie's fabrications. This looked like another performance, and they were right. Marie wasn't a kidnapping victim. She was a fugitive. The very next day, relatives discovered that their home had been burglarized. Clothing and personal items were taken, and their car was gone as well. Left behind was a note warning them not to contact the police. They didn't heed this warning. They knew Marie must be responsible. Investigators discovered that Marie Hilley was indeed responsible. She abandoned the stolen vehicle in Georgia and boarded a bus. Then she simply disappeared. For months, nobody knew where she was. The woman accused of poisoning her husband and daughter had vanished. The FBI joined the search, and a nationwide manhunt began. But while investigators were searching for Marie Hilley, Marie was already becoming someone else, again. Because what happened next would transform this murder case into one of the strangest fugitive stories in American history. Most fugitives hide. Marie reinvented herself. She changed her name and appearance and made up a new backstory. Over the next several years, she would convince complete strangers that she was someone else entirely. She presented herself as a wealthy widow, a tragic survivor, a grieving mother. She claimed her children had died in a terrible accident. The lies grew bigger. The stories became more outrageous. And somehow, people kept believing them. But Marie's most unbelievable deception was still ahead. After fleeing Alabama, Marie eventually made her way to Florida, where she met a man named John Homan. John was kind, financially comfortable, and exactly the sort of person Marie had spent her entire life learning how to manipulate. She introduced herself as Robbie Homan, and she came with a heartbreaking story. According to Marie, aka Robbie, she had once been married to a wealthy attorney and had 2 children. Then tragedy struck. She said her children died in a terrible automobile accident. Later, her husband died as well. Now she was alone, trying to rebuild her life. Her tragic fable was carefully designed to generate sympathy from this kind man. And it worked. John believed her. Soon, the two became romantically involved. Before long, Marie had a new home, a new identity, and a new life. For a while, things worked out well for Marie, aka Robbie. The FBI was still looking for Marie Hilley, but Marie Hilley no longer existed. Eventually, the couple moved to New Hampshire. There, Marie found employment and once again impressed everyone she met. Coworkers consistently described her as intelligent, organized, and capable. She could have built a successful life, honestly. Instead, she chose deception, and the lies never stopped. Her new friends heard stories from Robbie. So many stories, it was hard to keep up. Robbie told them about an inheritance she was fighting for. She shared stories about her battle with various medical issues. And of course, she shared her supposed family tragedies. The details changed, but the purpose remained the same. She wanted attention, playing on their sympathies for it. But what she really wanted was control. Marie needed to be the center of every story. It was as if she couldn't stop herself, even when her lies became reckless. Then she created her most unbelievable fiction yet. Robbie spoke often about a twin sister named Terry. John and her coworkers frequently witnessed her speaking with Terry over the phone. Terry was very involved in Robbie's life. She helped manage family affairs and worried about Robbie's health. The twin sisters appeared to be very close. There was just one problem. Terry didn't exist. She existed only in Robbie's imagination. But she spoke about Terry so often that people accepted her as real. Then things became even stranger. Robbie said her health was deteriorating and she was leaving for specialized treatment in Texas for a blood disorder. She insisted that her husband John remain in New Hampshire so as not to jeopardize his job. Terry would be with her, she reminded him. Shortly after Robbie left for Texas, John received devastating news. Robbie was dead. The woman he loved was gone. Coworkers were stunned, but no more so than when Marie, aka Robbie, now posing as Terry, Robbie's twin, showed up on John's doorstep, looking exactly like Robbie. Of course, she was Robbie's twin, right? Except she wasn't, because Robbie had never existed, and neither had Terry. Both women were Marie. The entire drama had been written, produced, and performed by a single person. Think about that for a moment. Marie had spent years pretending to be Robbie. Then she began pretending to be Robbie's twin sister. Then she announced Robbie's death. And finally, she stepped fully into the role of Terry. It sounds absurd, like something from a movie, but it actually happened. And for a while, people accepted it, although some were skeptical. Still, it was hard for even skeptics to believe that anyone, even Robbie, would have the audacity to pretend to be her own twin. The problem with elaborate lies, however, is that eventually they become impossible to manage. Details get mixed up. Timelines stop making sense. Questions become harder to answer. Meanwhile, the FBI had never stopped looking for the wanted fugitive, Marie Hilley. Investigators continued following leads around the country. Most went nowhere. But eventually, one landed in exactly the right place. Someone recognized Marie. Not Robbie Homan, not Terry Martin. This woman was Marie Hilley. They were sure of it. The information reached the authorities. As they interviewed people who knew Robbie Homan and Terry Martin, one fact became impossible to ignore. Nobody had ever seen them together. Not once. There were stories, but there was no proof that the two women existed as separate people. Authorities obtained fingerprints. The comparison ended the mystery. Robbie Homan, Terry Martin, and Marie Hilley were all the same person. After nearly 4 years on the run, Marie's extraordinary performance was over. In January 1983, she was arrested in New Hampshire. Even then, she reportedly continued insisting she was Terry Martin. Imagine this scene. Years of investigation, a nationwide search, and irrefutable fingerprint evidence. And Marie, still trying to convince people she was someone else. It's almost impossible not to be amazed by the sheer audacity. Not because it was admirable, because it was unbelievable. Eventually, reality won. Marie was extradited back to Alabama. Prosecutors laid out the evidence, and the evidence was overwhelming. Marie Hilley was convicted of murdering Frank Hilley and attempting to murder her daughter Carol, and was sentenced to life in prison. At last, it seemed the story was finally over. But somehow, even the ending of Marie Hilley's life would be bizarre. In 1987, after 4 years in prison with a spotless record, Marie was granted a 3-day prison furlough. When the furlough ended, guess what? She didn't return. Once again, she disappeared. A search was launched. For nearly 4 years, Marie Hilley had successfully evaded one of the largest manhunts in Alabama history. And old habits die hard. Authorities began searching for the 53-year-old fugitive. This time, however, Marie wasn't fleeing with a new identity, a helpful boyfriend, or a carefully crafted story. She was alone, and she was hopelessly unprepared. Cold rain swept across northern Alabama that week. Temperatures dropped. Marie wandered through the countryside near Anniston, not far from the place where her extraordinary story had begun decades earlier. For 4 days, she drifted through the woods and fields around her hometown. Without an alias, a disguise, or an audience to charm, there was no one to manipulate. It was just Marie, alone, cold, wet, and hopelessly lost. On February 26, 1987, a resident in Anniston's Blue Mountain community stepped outside and discovered a disheveled woman collapsed on her porch. The woman was covered in mud. Her clothing was torn. She appeared confused and delirious. Years of carefully maintained appearances were gone. The stylish woman who had always taken pride in looking immaculate was nearly unrecognizable. Emergency responders rushed her to a hospital. During the ambulance ride, she lost consciousness. After arriving at the hospital, she suffered a heart attack. Only a few hours after being found, Marie Hilley was dead. The official cause was hypothermia and exposure. It was an astonishing end. Not because it was dramatic, because it really wasn't. After years of elaborate schemes, fake identities, mysterious illnesses, forged tragedies, and breathtaking deception, Marie's story ended not with a final con or a daring escape. It ended with a lonely woman wandering through the cold Alabama rain. There would be no more aliases, no more victims, no more stories, just unanswered questions. And there were plenty of those. To this day, questions remain. Frank's murder was proven. Carol's poisoning was proven. But investigators have long wondered whether there were other victims. What about the relatives and acquaintances who became mysteriously ill after spending time around Marie? What about the traces of arsenic found in family members who later died of natural causes? How many victims were there? No one knows. And now, no one ever will. Because Marie took those answers with her. She was a poisoner, a con artist, a fugitive, a master manipulator, a woman who created entire lives out of thin air and convinced people they were real. For years, she escaped accountability by becoming someone else, again and again, until finally, there was nowhere left to run. And that is the unbelievable story of Marie Hilley, the woman who became her own twin. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload a new video. If you'd like to hear the entire audio version of this episode, listen to it on the Once Upon a Crime podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and wherever you find your podcasts. Or you can find all our episodes as well as get links to our social media channels on our website, truecrimepodcast.com.